So hi, here's Florian with a new podcast today, and I have a new guest. So introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Doreen, and I'm the CEO and founder of LEMONCAT, an online marketplace for catering.
Awesome. So Doreen, tell us something about yourself. Like, what's your story?
My story is quite long already. So I'm 37, and I started my first company when I was 23. I come from a completely different background. I studied art history, literature, and media, so no business background. And when I started looking for a place to study, I had to find myself a job. I started in sales and accidentally landed in an internet company, in a startup back then, based in Silicon Valley. So I was working here in Germany in their sales department. And that was my first touch point with the startup scene and tech companies and so on. And then I was working for them for a couple of years. And when I was 23, I decided, together with a business partner, to start my own company. The name of the company was Yields, and we were basically a marketing and telesales outsourcing company for corporates. So yeah, that company had nothing to do with the startup scene then. So I was working for blue chips, and they running their sales departments. And then at some point we were around 80 people. We were working with, I would say, a handful of very good big corporations. And we met two very cool, ambitious founders. The founders of Ecomi. Ecomi was back then just an idea. Today it's one of the world's largest reviews and ratings companies based in Berlin, and they had this great idea, but they had not so much money, not so much sales skills and experiences. So we said, okay, look guys, give us some equity in the company, and we will give you the money for the sales, and for basically testing the product and so on. This is what we did, and then after a while we realized it was working very, very well. We could sell a lot of the implementations. And at some point I sold my company to Ecomi. We merged both companies. We stopped working for external companies, dedicated all the 80 salespeople to Ecomi only. And we made the company big in Europe, brought on board an investor. So it's still, as I said, very successful. Goldman Sachs invested a couple of years ago. And after a while, it was time for me to move on and time to take on a new challenge. I was late 20s back then. And through my network, I met a cool team, and they said, okay, we're going to start something great here in Berlin. We want to do a platform for online pizza delivery. And I was, in the first moment, I thought, online pizza delivery, really? Would people order their pizza online? But that was, the birthday, basically, of Lieferheld, of Delivery Hero. And I was part of the initial team, of the Delivery Hero team. We started in Germany and pretty quickly launched when I left, we were in 20 international markets with around about 1,000 employees. And I did that for 3 years, initially as their CSO, Chief Sales Officer, and then a year later I became the COO. I was responsible for the whole operations, customer care, processes, international expansion, and all that kind of stuff. And then thereafter I worked a little bit in financing or in the VC field, and especially in the US, invested in US startups and scaled them and helped them to launch internationally. And then finally I started LEMONCAT.
Cool, awesome. So you had quite some different stories, different paths. So how is the decision process like? How does it come when you make the decision and then do action to change something?
Well, I think I am a very creative person, and I do a lot of decisions based on gut feel. And of course, these days I have my experiences. I saw quite some things, and I know what's good for me and what is a good fit. But I think when I had my very first position and then came to the next and to the next, it was a lot of opportunity-based decisions. So I saw something, I liked it, I was very passionate about it, and then I just had the feeling it just felt right. It was not that I had a pro and con list or something like that, doing it very structured, but it was really many times was based on gut feel.
Yeah, cool. So it was from the beginning like that. You always went with your gut feeling.
I think these days I have to be careful that I do not think too much.
Okay.
Because when I was early 20s and I started my first company and then the next and so on, it was mainly based on gut feel and based on what felt right and where I really liked the team and I wanted to spend time with the team and so on. I always had I think the team was for me always one of the biggest decision points. Do I like the people? Can I get along with these people? Do I want to work day and night basically with that team? And of course today I know a lot about financing, a lot about investors, like the whole startup ecosystem, how it really works. And then of course sometimes other things come also into the decision-making process, but still I try to remind myself, stick to what worked in the past and do not change your processes too much.
Awesome. So how do you remind yourself to stick to the old learnings? Do you have a list of that, or how do you handle that?
I have the list in my head. No, there is no real reminding process either, but I think I like to read a lot, and there's also whatever you read. Again, I studied literature, so I had to read all the important books in the world, especially Goethe and Schiller and all these Thomas Mann and so on. And there's so many answers already in the books. And then, I don't know, at some point you just have a good feeling if that is the right thing for you to do. And that's why you just... Sometimes you think it through so much that you end up trusting your head more than your gut feel or more than your heart. But the first initial thought you had was probably the most accurate thought you had. And that's why I keep thinking, also when I have interviews, for example, and I interview people for LEMONCAT and I want to bring on board people, and the feeling I had in the very first moment or in the first minute is usually the correct one. And then I try to remind myself, okay, how did you feel about it in the very first moment before you started to find arguments in your head for or against this?
Cool. So awesome. But you still listen to them. You don't send them home immediately if they come in and you have a bad feeling and they say sorry.
No, I don't send them home immediately, of course. But anyway, if I have a bad feeling about something, I also don't waste my time. So if I feel like, that is not at all a good fit, why would I spend an hour? Then you can also say after 15 minutes, look, I think it's not really a good fit, and then you save everybody's time. Yeah,
correct. Always important to protect your time. So you know quite a lot about the startup scene, and startups should be innovative. But the word innovation is really difficult because everyone understands something different about it. So what is innovation for you?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Of course, I really like to describe my own companies also as very innovative companies. I definitely saw a lot of innovation in the Silicon Valley area, in the Bay Area. When you go over to the US and talk to startups, they are really trying to disrupt certain fields, while here in Europe sometimes you have more the feeling people come more from that execution side of things, and they want to scale things fast and they want to do it right from the process perspective, but sometimes they're not so interested in building the best product. At LEMONCAT, we are very much a product company, so not only from a staff perspective that really, almost not quite 50%, but I would say a bit more than 30-40% is product and tech and designers. So we really try to understand the market, and we really try to solve problems with tech. And I think that is important, and that tells you something about innovation, but also to challenge the status quo, keep asking questions, don't accept that this is the way it is supposed to be only because it was like that the last 10-20 years. I think this is what I think is innovation is, and what I always try to do. I did that again, I did that with my gut feel when I was, in my 20s, and I started a company. I had absolutely no respect for old processes or whatever was there. I always tried to challenge what I saw, and I thought, hey, I could do that better, and that's why I do it differently. And I think that is a good approach, definitely, because innovation comes from change, maybe.
Yeah. That's correct. Innovation is always change, and the world changes all the time. And it changes rapidly more than like ever. So at the moment you're building a marketplace, and marketplace are, out of my perspective, always the hardest thing to build, because you need two sides. You know, like the one people which offer something and the one which buy something. So what you would say were your biggest learnings of building a marketplace?
Yeah, I think marketplaces are definitely challenging, but seriously, I would not say it's more challenging than building a good software as a service or something like that. I think it always depends on how complicated or how complex is the industry you are in, and so on. Of course, in a marketplace you have two sides. We even take also our supply side, the caterer side, very seriously, so that we even build a software as a service for them. So that was our latest big feature release end of last year. So and also I wish there would be a recipe, for the perfect marketplace, and it would be easy. Going forward, the second marketplace for me, Delivery Hero, Lieferheld, was the first one. I think one important learning I've made, and I also got as feedback from other founders, as a cool marketplace founders, is that you definitely must make sure that you have the supply and demand growth right. So in our case, for example, if we would have, in Germany we have 14,000 caterers, let's say we would bring them all on board and be super good at bringing on board the caterers, but on the other hand we don't have demand, then the caterers would be on board, and it would not take too long, maybe a month, 2 or 3, and then they would say, LemonCat is a strange partner, they brought me on board and now nothing is coming through them, no requests, no orders, and so on. So it's very important that you have your strategy on how to scale and what is your launch plan. For example, we decided to go for a top-down approach. You go with the biggest cities first, and you try to have a decent coverage. What does decent coverage mean? How many caterers is that per inhabitants, for example, or per companies in that city? Do we need different caterers, different cuisine types like sushi, pizza, or caterers who are delivering the international standard catering, all that kind of stuff. And then if you bring on board a new partner, make sure they're getting revenue from you or they're getting orders from you very fast, because that creates a perfect experience for them, that they have the feeling, oh wow, LemonCat brought me on board and now I have already made my, XYZ orders with them and I did so much revenue with them. That gives them a very good feeling. And then they would also support you, and they would, deliver exactly the service you want them to deliver towards the customers. On the other side, it's also important, of course, in the end, ultimately you are still a customer-facing company, right? You want the customers to come back, you want them to reorder, so you also have to make sure that the caterers meet your standards. Yeah. So you should also communicate very clearly, what do we expect from you, when to deliver, how friendly, what to wear, for example, in talk about Lieferheld or Deliveroo these days. I mean, what do the drivers even wear? It's like something which Deliveroo gave to them. It's like the jacket and all that kind of stuff, and the backpack. So this is what you need to define for yourself when you start a marketplace, how to scale that, the demand and the supply at the same time. I think that is probably the most challenging part. Yeah.
So, especially scaling is always difficult. So what I got out of you, that most people, you think of the most, especially American companies, they try to scale as fast as possible and as hard as possible. But on the other side, what you said, it's like to have it simultaneously, make it both in the right speed. So it's probably mainly driven by the customer base, which paces the scaling, or do you try to pace the scaling from the company itself, like from LemonCat?
Well, again, you must really scale both things at the same time, and usually in marketplaces scenarios, it's like that. Maybe LemonCat is an exception because it's a B2B marketplace. We only work with business customers, but let's talk about Lieferheld. It's a consumer marketplace, and we wanted to have TV readiness, right? Yeah. Because in Germany, you don't have this one big city like London in the UK or Paris in France. You have 6, 7 bigger cities.
Yeah.
So if you wanna do TV ads, there is no TV channel only for Berlin or only for Munich. So if you have TV spots out there, you must have a good, decent coverage throughout the country.
Yeah.
So the first challenge was be TV ready, meaning have 80% coverage of Germany. So, of course, you must have a sales team bringing on board the restaurants pretty fast, but at the same time, again, the restaurants are waiting for your orders. They are asking every day, when are my orders coming? When can I expect the first orders? So at the same time, you must start with marketing campaigns. So you must scale your SEM, you must do paid campaigns, paid AdWords, display or TV spots or whatever to attract the customer, make the customer come and order from your supply. Yeah. So it's really not one or the other, or not one after the other. It's both, at the same time.
Sounds really difficult. Cool. So startups are always there to solve problems, and you have always problems in front of you. And what would you say were your biggest challenges in the last 3 years, and how did you solve them?
Well, I think maybe I cannot really say only in the last 3 years, but talking about all the companies I did in the past, there's probably 2 big challenges which stand out, and that is, on the one hand, making sure that you never run out of money and that you have a good deal flow and that you can bring on board good investors. That is, of course, key, especially, majority of the startups need money. They're not profitable yet, so they just need that external money to grow further and to accelerate growth. So that's a very important challenge for a founder, always to make sure that you have a good investor base and, that you're never running out of money. And the second biggest challenge is probably when you are, for whatever reason, when you need to downsize and you need to lay off people. I think that is most of the time really a very challenging part from a personal side. Of course, there's these managers and these managers, but I try to always treat my people with a lot of respect, and I owe them something because they built my company with me, together, and everyone, even if an employee was just here for half a year, whatever, they did their piece, of the whole puzzle to make LEMONCAT great. And that's why I think whenever you have to have these kind of conversations, that is, of course, always a challenging thing, right?
Do you have some advice you could give to people which are stuck in similar situations?
I think be straight to the point and be honest. That helped for me most of the time. There's different things why you have difficult conversations with employees sometimes, right? That can be on the one hand that the performance is just not right, and it is just not a good fit between the employee and the company at this point of time. And I keep thinking that there's, of course, for every employee there's the perfect company, and of course everyone has certain specialties or strengths. So sometimes it's just not a good fit, but usually I realize that if I then go into such a conversation, that my employee already realized as well that it was not going so well. It's a little bit like in a relationship, it's very rarely happening that someone is insanely in love and the other person says, look, it's not working out. Usually both parties kind of realize that already, that something is going on, and I think then it's just fair to speak it out and have a conversation about it. Because again, the gut feel here comes in again, right? People realize that. And so being straight to the point, being honest, I think that was for me always the best.
How do you make the decision? Normally it's let's stick in a relationship thing, you're waiting that something gets better because it's a hard decision. It's a hard thing to go after this feeling, say, okay, no, stop. So how do you go about this conclusion? When do you decide to take action?
Very fast. I think that's an important advice. So you have to make those decisions very fast. I think it's for no one a good thing to wait too long, not for the company, not for the employee. And I think in general, I try to see myself here very much as the defender of the company. I think that for me, at some point, it was very clear that I have to see it like that. So I On a personal side, maybe I'm even friends with my, of course, I have a very good relationship with my teammates, right? And we go for coffee, we go for lunch or whatever. So I like them personally, but anyway, I'm as the managing director or founder or whatever, I'm responsible for the survival of the whole company. And that means survival of the whole company equals 40 other people or 100 or 1,000 other people, right? So you just need to judge very objectively, is it working out or not? And I think if you take all kinds of emotions out of it, it is a very straightforward and not insulting thing. And I think that's, for me, very important. Try to make it a very objective decision. Is the performance there or not? Did we determine any specific goals, KPIs? Is the person hitting the numbers or not? It's not so complicated if you did it right from the hiring process on, and then it's actually pretty easy to see if that person is really an overperformer, if the person is okay and doing a good job, or if the person is totally far away from the goal he or she was supposed to deliver. And if that is so, then usually the person feels that, as I told you before, the person realizes that already, like themselves, and then it's you owe them a conversation anyway. So that's why I think it's important not to make such an emotional thing out of it, but be respectful, and then judge from the results.
Yeah. So how do you set goals in your company for the employees? What's your process for that?
Of course, in positions like sales, for example, it's pretty easy. You have really monthly goals, and you have achievement plans and so on. You know how much revenue, how many orders or whatever they are supposed to bring in, and you have benchmarks. I'm coming from a sales background, so goal setting was something I knew really right from being 19 years old. I had a quota to achieve, and it was revenue and or orders or whatever, and then you got commission once you hit it or not. And of course, there was benchmarks, so you could always say a salesperson comes and joins the company, and after probably for me, a good time frame is 3 months. Mm-hmm. You know if that person will ever hit the quota or not. So you just know, okay, the best person in 3 months was here, and you just hired a new person, where's the new person, and then you can judge. And say it's pretty easy. That's why I have been a fan of goals really since the beginning. So I try to have goals in all the departments. In LEMONCAT overall, we decided at some point to work with OKRs, which is objectives and key results. So in every single department, we have, in the company overall, we have objectives for a quarter or for half a year, sometimes depends. And every department is supposed to write down key results they want to achieve. They have to be measurable, they have to be specific, and all that kind of stuff. And then it's also for those departments like marketing or even customer care operations. It makes it easier to see, hey, did you achieve what you wanted to achieve? And the teams are setting their goals themselves. They are presenting the goals to the rest of the company, and then of course the management, myself, we can challenge them a bit. We can say, look, is that maybe too many key results, or do you think it's ambitious enough, and so on. But in the end, they set the goals themselves with our approval, and then why would they not hit it, And if they are not hitting it, then we need to discuss why not, what was wrong,
Yeah, cool, definitely. You said that a great team for you is really important. So how you make sure that if you grow a company, that it stays a good team?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it took me years and years to to come up with a good plan here. I think I'm still not there. It's constant learning. But what I did learn from the US companies, and it was a very cool time back then, because I learned a lot how they are approaching it, and of course they mastered many things over there. And I was introduced to one thing they called culture check. Mm-hmm. And I introduced it here at LEMONCAT. It was the first company that I did it, because I realized, okay, when I started LEMONCAT, I was, I think, 35 or so, and I said, I'm too old for, sitting in a shitty office with people I just like or I just find okay and I don't totally like. So I said, it's my fourth company now, and I want to have a place where I feel comfortable and where my employees feel comfortable, where we can have a great time together. And I don't want to only sit on IKEA tables, And I also only want to work with people I really like and people I would really like to go on a vacation with. And that is basically why we introduced the culture check. So what is that? It's basically the final interview, which I usually try to do myself if I'm not the hiring manager. So the hiring manager does the whole check on functional things, on do you bring the skills for your job? And then I always try to have the last interview, which is only an interview about how are you as a person? And do you share the same values? Do you share the same vision? Why do you like food? Why do you like the food market? What do you think is a challenge we want to solve here? Do you share the same? Yeah, it's really like sharing the same passion for food and for what we want to achieve here at LEMONCAT. And I asked myself the question: would I really like to hang out with that person? Would I maybe even like to go on a vacation or on a weekend trip with that person? And that, in the end, is for me the final check if I think that person fits LEMONCAT. And I think so far the team is giving me great feedback that we put together a fantastic bunch of people which really fits together very nicely. So there is not this, oh, I hate this department, or I don't like this guy from there. Everyone gets along with each other very well. Of course, well, we are not 5,000 people yet, and I also know that probably at some point this is also becoming more and more difficult. Anyway, there is big companies like Airbnb, and that was basically one thing I learned from Airbnb. Do a lot of interviews, many eyes on a candidate, many checks also from that cultural background and perspective. And at least you decrease significantly the risk of having people you don't want to work with in the company.
Yeah, it's always difficult, because if you do this last point and the person took a lot of interviews already, and then you sit there and say, sorry.
But it's not that bad. I have actually a couple of very cool examples. So first of all, my team also has an awareness already if we would like the person or not. So I think it's probably 1 out of 10. Okay. And again, only the 10, the best of the best, make it to my culture check, right? So they did a lot of interviews before that as well. And I think an important learning is really, if you are the hiring manager, and that I think is a big threat for most of the startups, especially nowadays when we have a lot of startups, there's so much war and fight for talent in Berlin going on, that the hiring manager says, okay, I do need a marketing manager. And there is no good marketing manager in the market. And then you keep interviewing, and you cannot really find a person. And you start becoming desperate, very desperate. Yeah. And you need to fill this position very desperately. Yeah. And then you tend to accept a candidate which is not an A player, not a perfect fit. And what happens now is that other people who are maybe A players see that you also hire mediocre people. And then A players don't want to work with okay-ish people anymore, and then it's this downwards trend of always hiring less and less fit people, So that is super important to have that the culture check is being done by a person who has no say in that department, but is really having an eagle's eye, basically, view on that employee or person who applied for the job.
So it's made by a person which doesn't have the urgent to fill this position.
Exactly.
But like especially you're like the head of everything. Do you not have the urgent that you need certain positions, and you feel the pressure that you don't have that?
Well, if I have the urgency, I could not do the culture check.
That's
the thing. So that's why it is important that there's really this differentiation between if that my department where I am the hiring manager, then I cannot do the culture check. Yeah. But if it's, let's say, from the product side, my CPO is looking for a product manager, and he brings that person, the product manager, then into the culture check, and I tell him, look, I think it's not the A player we were looking for. And then he's like, yeah, but I cannot find it. Yeah, but it's not the person. Let's continue the search and let's look further.
Do you have a special trick how you like work with the holes, like with the needed positions? Like there's a reason why the position is needed. So do you have a special way to handle that? That like if a position is so long open because you need the time to search the right person, to find the right person?
No, I think I do not have the secret sauce here. I mean, every startup has a problem, right? But it does not need, only because you are looking for the perfect person doesn't mean that you are looking forever and for months and months and months. It just means try harder to find the best person.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point. You said also that like financing is like really key points or the key learning from you. What is your tips on financing?
There's so many.
the best ones.
It really depends. I think the financing rounds and fundraising and bringing on board investors has so much dependent on what kind of company you are running or starting. What is that, a seed round or a later stage growth or whatever? Are you planning to do a VC case? You really want to have a lot of venture capital, or you want to basically bootstrap and still be the majority shareholder in the company, so it is very, very hard to only say some random tips. It really depends on a specific use case, what is good, what is bad. I think it is maybe important for every new founder to read a lot about contracts and really talk to others, because there is so many learnings out there, specific learnings, when it comes to valuation of the company, how much equity should you give away when you bring on board your first investor, is 10% okay, or is it rather 40%? So that is something you should really share and try to find brainstorming partners or people who have more experience than you have yourself. That is important, that you kind of get a feeling, where am I, what do I want to achieve, and what kind of deals did other people get, because there is, I think, a big variety from people who did it before and people who are doing it for the first time. And usually people who did it before have more awareness for make sure that you really keep as much equity as you can for yourself or for your team, because you need to be motivated for the next 10 years or even longer than that. And the more you give away for having a quick million now, you will regret later on. I think so. It's really talk to others. That's important. Try to find brainstorming partners. Try to get in touch with people who did fundraisings before and who could give you some tips on the contracts and stuff like that.
So get a feeling from mentors and other startups how they did it, and then learn what's for you the right way.
Exactly.
If a young person says he or she wants to become a founder, what would you tell them?
Do it. It's fantastic. I never regretted it. I mean, of course, there is also very, very tough times. I mean, don't get me wrong. You have to get used to, a good workload. And of course, a lot of stress and pressure as well, because there's, especially if there's several million involved, of course, the pressure level is not really low. But anyway, I always enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed being creative. I enjoyed fulfilling my own visions and chasing my dreams and really doing what I enjoyed. And I would always give the recommendation to people who are thinking about founding a company, do it early. Do it very early. I also started it even before I started my studies. And I think then you are still at a pretty young age and you got a lot of experience, which is good, because you need a lot of energy to run a startup and start a company. And I think if you wait too long and then maybe you have kids and you have family and you are getting used to a very decent lifestyle, then it's very hard to start from zero again. And that's why I would always recommend start super early, as soon as you can. It's actually it cannot be too early.
Yeah, good tip. Would you say it's different for a woman to found a company?
I don't know. I mean, when I started my first company, I never had this gender thing in my mind. I think that's also a benefit of starting very early, because you don't have like these stereotypes in your mind. Yeah. Of course, the more it's now everywhere in the media and so on. Of course, also with me, it raises an awareness, and of course, I also realize now that there is so few women. But it never disturbed me when I started, and I feel comfortable being in a room with other founders, and I don't care if it's female or male founders. Now I wish it would be there would be more female founders, but I never had the feeling that I had disadvantages or anything like that from being a female founder. I keep thinking that if the business model is great and if the company is great, you would always find investor money as well. So from that perspective, I never had really bad experiences, but I can only encourage the ladies out there to give it a try and don't be scared.
That's a really good tip, and start as early as possible.
Yeah.
So you said already that like if you become a founder, you need to be able to handle a big workload. So what is your take on work-life balance?
These days it's a little bit different for me, since I have a little kid at home. My daughter is 4, and in total we have 3 kids. The 2 older ones are with us for the weekends and so on. So we have, of course, we have to make time for them, and we want to spend time with the family as well. So therefore, I really try to make sure that during the week I also have a couple of days when I'm home for dinner, for example. I can bring my kid to bed, but not every night. Unfortunately, not every night possible. So I also try to have some nights in my calendar when I really have an open-end working night, or when I can attend a dinner with business partners or stuff like that. So that is, I think, something I could not probably... No, for me, it would not be something to say like, look, every night I have to be home at 6 or so. So I try to find a good balance, but it also feels like a good balance. I do not have the feeling that I'm only working or something like that. But of course, when I started my first company, or actually every company before LEMONCAT, I was were also times when I was working nights and days, you know, it's like pretty intense. And but I also, I was very young back then, and I think I did not have the experience I have today. So I also think that I don't need to make all the mistakes again. So I have my learnings, and that's why it probably saves a little bit of time as well.
Yeah, that's correct. Experience is always good. Do you have like the issue that like you can't take off your mind from work, or is it not an issue?
That is an issue. Yeah, I think that is for most of the founders. I know that's the thing. So you basically wake up, and while brushing your teeth, you're thinking about the company and some ideas, or how could I don't know, steer the product further, or what kind of marketing initiative could I do? And when you are almost falling asleep, laying in bed, then the last thought is with the company as well. So I do have that thing going on. I don't know if it's a problem or not. And actually, I enjoy thinking about the company. I enjoy thinking about initiatives and how to change it and how to do stuff better, because this is what I mean with being creative and with really doing what I want, and like making my vision a reality. But of course, sometimes it's a bit tough as well. Like you need to come down as well, and you need to find some space in your head as well. That's why I started meditating some years ago, and that is actually a pretty cool thing. Helped me a lot on having some moments in my mind when I just say, okay, I want to just relax and don't think about anything company work related.
So how did you start with meditating? Like you did a course or read a book? Or? Yeah,
I read a couple of books, and I have some friends who are meditating, and then it was still, I thought it was very challenging to really get, start with it and understand it. And then I started with an app in the end, Headspace. So I'm a big fan of Headspace. And that app is so fantastic. When I hear the voice of Andy, of the guy who's speaking sometimes the guided meditations, I'm relaxed right away. So that works with me very, very well. And now I could meditate wherever. So I only need maybe a minute or two. I think it is really like if you would play tennis or play any other sport, that you learn the techniques, and once you learn the techniques, you can do it wherever, whenever. But it takes a little while, and that app helped me a lot.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So we already found out that we both like to read. So what are your favorite books?
Well, I don't really think I have favorite books in that sense, because I think I read a lot, and also many different things. I'm not only a reader of business books. Sometimes I even think the big business books are, a bit boring. Yeah. So I really like whatever novels. I like also the German classics and all that kind of stuff. But since you told me that you would ask me that questions, I checked my Kindle, and I was checking, okay, what book I really liked in the last weeks, which I would recommend you guys. And there were two. So one is indeed a business book, and that is called Powerful, from Patty McCord, and that she was the VP HR or Human Resources or from Netflix, and she was writing a very, very nice book of the early days of Netflix and how they developed their employees and what kind of attitude they had in the company, and that was really cool. So I can only recommend that. What I really love about the Kindle is you can take notes and you can mark sections, and then I download that and send it to my team so that they could go through my notes.
Cool.
And that's really cool. And then a novel I liked a lot, which is the story of Edison, and how he basically invented the light and how they made a company out of it, and how he also got in touch with investment bankers and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's a novel that is from Anthony McCartan. In German, it's Licht. I don't know if light is the English translation, like it's the book title, Light. But it's very. That was a very cool book. I enjoyed reading it.
That's awesome, yeah. I like books also a lot. So my last question is, if you could go back in time to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell yourself?
Actually, it wouldn't change so much, so there's not so much advice I would have given my 20-year-old self. Yeah, I think I would tell my 20-year-old self that it's super important if you want to run a company, if you want to start a company, that you really make sure that you want to do it long term and not only for a year or two. So this whole idea, sometimes I see throughout the startup scene that, hey, we do a startup and then in a year we are millionaires or something like that. That this is bullshit. You should really do it because you want to do it for a very long time. So I realize as soon as you do something because you really want to do it, I mean, it's this passion thing you keep hearing from everyone, but this is the most important driver. In the end, if you have also tough times or you're also running through the hard times with your company, the money has never been the motivating factor for me only. Of course, I love making money, and I'm happy that I had the chance to make my money with my companies, but the motivator is still that I always loved thinking about the area, the industry, the product, and all that kind of stuff. So it's important to think long term, as I think even more, and think long term, act as if you would like to run that company forever, and then make sure that you keep a majority in the company, that you have a say in the company, that you, even though you have to raise a lot of money and you of course have to dilute and you have to give equity to the VCs and to people who are giving you the money, still make sure that you feel like it's your company. That's important, because otherwise what I realize is that people are losing interest when they don't feel like they have a say anymore in the company.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, the same play again, if you could go back to your 30-year-old self, what would you tell her?
I think the same.
Just as a reminder.
No, it's really not such a difference. And again, I'm a positive thinker, so I always see opportunities. I think for me, really, the glass is always half full. And that's why I did not regret anything in my life. Everything happened, everything kind of fall in place, and that's why I never really thought, if I would have knew that would have known that. That's why it's not really something I would tell myself in certain ages, because for me, I'm also in a very lucky position. I mean, many things worked out very well for me, so therefore it's not so much I would change.
It's always the best answer. Thank you very much, Doreen. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
See you next time, guys.